May 7th, 2025 is an important deadline that we all need to remember for two reasons. The first one is because the urgency to meet this deadline might make us more susceptible to a scam. And what is this deadline for? It's for our Real ID, which is essentially an enhanced security driver's license that we're going to need for a couple of reasons. The most common would be to board a domestic flight. And like anything else that has urgency involved with it, scammers are paying attention. So I want to share with you an article from AARP that shares with us how we can avoid becoming victims to this scam. The article is called 6 Ways to Avoid a Real ID Scam as the TSA Deadline Approaches. And it starts off saying, we know anytime people are up against a deadline, we will find a way to expedite to get the process done, and that's when the scams pop up. Most Real ID frauds will likely be phishing scams, either emails, text, or calls that appear to be from a legitimate source, such as our state DMV or our federal Department of Homeland Security. And the messages will look real and they'll entice us to click on links so the criminals can obtain our personal information or download malware on our computers. You know, scammers shouldn't be called scammers. They should be called cockroaches. And I really wish we could just stomp them all out, but that's not possible. So how do we protect ourselves? Okay, the first one is to get our Real ID. Once we have our Real ID, we're not going to be tempted on to click on links that we might get texted to us or emailed to us or phone calls, because we've already got our Real ID. There's no sense of urgency, so we're taking that away. The second one is basic scam avoidance, which is don't click on links from unknown sources. And that rule applies to any email or text that we didn't initiate, even if the message looks official and includes a DMV logo, Department of Homeland Security logo, etc. The next one is to watch for clues that something's amiss. And unfortunately, scammers are getting better. And with artificial intelligence, the grammar mistakes are mostly gone, so we can't count on those to protect us. But just see if there's something amiss. They talk about a fake DMV email or website that might have a .com extension rather than a .gov. The article also talked about a text coming from one state saying it was from one state, but it actually had a phone number call back that was out of state. So, you know, that was a pretty silly miss by the cockroaches. And fortunately so that fewer people became victims. Okay, the next one is don't expect a DMV to ask for your information online. To get a Real ID, you typically need to go in person to a DMV office where we need to present documents proving our age and our identity, our social security number, and our address. And then to share the experience. If we're targeted by a scam, to report it to the Federal Trade Commission. They give a website that's you can see here, and then also the AARP Fraud Watch Network. So, you know, unfortunately, these frauds are becoming way too common, and they're costing people thousands of dollars. You know, once somebody has our information, they can do a lot of damage. So we need to be super careful. The reality is we live in a digital world now. The reality is if you're over 40, if you're over 50, if you're over 60, we are targets for the scammers. Why? Because we've had longer to save money. Our bank accounts likely have more money. Our credit cards probably have a higher limit associated with them. And as we get older, you know, frankly, we're not as up to date on the technology. We may not be as mentally sharp as we were a few years ago. So we're an easier victim and we're a more lucrative victim. So we need to stay especially vigilant. Another thing that we need to be super careful of, obviously don't, you know, anytime you have that, what do they call it? Two-factor authentication, where our bank or our credit card might text us a code. We never, ever, ever give that code to anybody. I think most of us know that now. We've seen it so prevalent. The other thing is having a code texted to you is not as secure as a lot of people, including myself until recently. It's not as secure as we think it is. Unfortunately, scammers, cockroaches can take our personally identifiable information and use it to trick our cell phone providers into switching our numbers, or sometimes these scammers have people on the inside at the cell phone providers. So probably for most of us, having that authentication app on our phone is a more secure thing. The other thing is if you have not yet gotten a password manager, I urge you to do that. Way too many of us are reusing passwords. And the days when we could get away with that, there never was a day you could get away with that. Once somebody has that one password, we've opened Pandora's box to a lot of very sensitive and potentially costly information. So reusing passwords just amplifies the problem, because scammers will try different things and see, well, let's see if this is the password for the bank, maybe it's the password for the credit card. If it's the password for the credit card, maybe it's the password for their airline application. They're buying tickets somewhere. So reusing passwords can be something that's really cautious. We have to be careful. And we want to lock things down as much as we can. And the reality is it takes a little bit more time when we do things securely. But, when you think about the amount of time it used to take us to go to the bank, right? We would go to the bank in person and talk to a teller. We'd wait in line. And now we can take a picture of a check. We can deposit a check. There's so much of our banking that we can do online. So yes, using a password manager takes longer. Yes, using two-factor authentication or an authentication app takes longer, but we're still saving lots and lots of time. Unfortunately, there's a little bit of a retraining that takes place. So if you haven't done that yet, I urge you to think about using both of those services and protecting yourself as much as you can. And then the other thing is just being careful, right? We used to be able to depend on, here's a phone number that's in my contact list, and it sounds like a friend of mine. It sounds like a family member. But in today's world with AI, boy, it doesn't take much. They can clone our voice just using your voicemail message. So we have to be careful. It may make sense if something doesn't quite seem right, or if they're saying something bizarre, somebody's in jail, they're in trouble, they need to get bailed out. It might make sense to ask, hey, you remember your age 5 birthday, what was that present I gave you that you were so excited about? Something that's memorable, something that only that person would know. Or, if you have an adult friend, hey, tell me where we went out to dinner last month, or something like that, just to be sure, because boy, the world is changing quickly, and we don't want to become victims of scams. And if you like videos like this, where I talk about protecting yourself, where I talk about making good decisions, where I talk about getting ready to retire, the YouTube algorithm says this is my next video that you should watch. Thanks for watching this one. Bye-bye.